Hey Greg, how you doing? Hey Jeff, can you hear me?
Do you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
All right, I got you too.
Good, good.
Very good.
How you doing, Paul? I was gonna wear that same shirt. I'm glad I didn't now.
Uh-oh, you have this one? Oh no.
How's your world treating you?
It's good. Although I just looked out the window, looks like it's snowing or something. I don't
Yeah,
know.
some type of precipitation going on. Like two big storms 2 days in a row. Come on.
Yeah.
I was out the other night. These are little tips that you don't show us, Jeff. So I screwed this up. I was out the other night. I was trying to do a North Pole alignment for an hour and a half, and I kept getting unable to plate solve.
Hmm.
And it kept saying, check your focal length. So anyway, after an hour and a half, I said I'm going to just shut it down and start all over again. Oh, I wonder if I should have focused at first.
Oh. Yep.
So I did the focus within 2 seconds. I did the plate solve when I was there.
Yep. Yeah.
Another
Yeah.
one.
When in doubt, focus.
Uh,
See, if you're one of those visual people, you don't really have to worry about focusing because it's all faint and fuzzy anyway. It's like nobody would
exactly. Yeah.
know. Nobody would
Yeah.
know.
No, it was good. It's like, well, every time I do it, I learn. It's that lesson learned again. An hour and a half. I was
Yeah.
getting really ticked off because I couldn't get it to work, but and then it's like, oh man, I bet you just focused wrong. So when the stars were about the size of a grapefruit, I was like, yeah, I bet that can't be right. It was windy too. We almost lost a 22-inch obsession.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's one thing that doesn't work well with a telescope is wind.
yeah. Are you doing any local observing or strictly your remote site?
No, I do have my, smaller scope for backyard use that I've
Yeah,
done now and then.
yeah.
So,
Hey,
but I'm pickier than I used to be. It's like, if there's only going to be a few hours on a night, I'm not setting up anymore. I'm like, yeah, screw that. It's like, if it looks like it'll be clear for a couple of nights, then yeah, okay. It looks like it might actually be clear tomorrow and Tuesday. You know,
yeah, that's what I was noticing. Yeah,
those are looking pretty good. Seeing tomorrow night might be pretty awful. Tuesday looks pretty darn good, actually.
yeah. Hey, I was talking to Ed Murphy on Friday, and they think that within the next couple of weeks they're going to have the second 24-inch remote telescope up. And that'll
Oh, wow.
obviously double their capacity. And they
Yeah.
have given us the opportunity to use that. And I think he said the second one, when they do public nights, they'll be able to put an eyepiece on it. But the first one, because it's so close to the road, they don't want anybody up there driving around when they have the roof open because of the
Yeah.
dust. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
Makes sense.
hey Demetrio, how you doing?
Looks like he's got those dots that say he's really trying hard to connect, but not quite there.
Not quite there yet. Yeah.
Uh-oh. Now it's an X. That's bad.
Yeah, that can't be good.
How you doing, Jeff?
Doing good.
Good, good.
So I have my computer up with running AI stuff now, and it says for
Hmm.
Zoom, start AI companion to assist with your meeting.
Yeah, I don't do that personally.
Yeah,
It's like I don't understand. Maybe for professional use, if I understand those goofy AI things, it'll kind of summarize the meeting for you, so you can,
yeah,
take a nap,
yeah.
and it'll tell you what you missed at the end.
Well, this one here says it's so smart, it'll tell you about the meeting before it even started. So I'm thinking that can't be good.
No, yeah, yeah, that sounds like cheating for sure.
Yeah. How you doing, Matt? Hey, Matt, can you hear us? Do I don't have these muted, do I? No.
Right, looks like the bottom half of my Zoom thing is kind of gone away. I don't know why that is. Here, let's try that way instead. Now I can see
Hey,
the.
hey, Paul, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Very well.
And you're speaking too. That's good.
Yeah, I got that on mute on.
All right, good.
So what do you use to focus? You're having an hour and a half to focus. What do you use to focus? Did you hear
What?
me?
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. Oh, what was I using?
Yeah.
Oh, I was using. It's ridiculous. I was using my small refractor with an ASI 2600 camera. It's got a guide chip in it and everything else. It should have worked perfectly. It should have been fine.
But
But I did.
do you have the EAF from
I do not have
Zoom?
that yet. No, not
That
yet.
is very
Ah,
that is well worth the investment. It's $199.
Yep.
And as soon as I get the scope going, I go to EAF, I focus, I do the fine focusing, then I go to my plate solving and my polar alignment.
Yep.
yep.
And
Yep.
that is a godsend. Also, it has a sensor you can get with it that will focus your setup automatically when the temperature drops below a certain level that you set, or every 2 hours, or every 1 hour that you want.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I get going in maybe 5 minutes.
Yep. Well, I'll tell you, Paul, here's the my thinking on this right now. I'm trying to learn how to do this stuff. So there was an EAF, the ZWO EAF was on sale this Christmas, this past holiday season, $20 off, and I thought, I'll just get it. And then I thought, no, if I get it, then I really just won't learn the whole process of focus and everything else. So I'm trying not to buy stuff that makes it so easy that I might as well just have a C star, with all due respect to C stars.
But at the same time, there are certain things that if you don't have them, you're making it harder than you really need it to be. So
Okay.
while a focuser might be optional, in principle, it's optional. In
Yeah.
principle, if you want to sleep at night, and I personally like to, you want that autofocuser.
Yeah, that
Got
makes
it.
it.
Got it.
Yeah, because I can set that thing up and go to sleep and come up 3 or 4 hours later and it's still focused because I have it automatically focused for whatever temperature
Mhm.
variation or every 1 or 2 hours. It's a godsend.
It's one of those things that's optional, but not really.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you guys, hold on a second. I'm going to the Gina site right now.
Okay. All right. Looks like we have a pretty good crowd here. I'm pleasantly surprised. Really didn't have any idea how much interest we'd have here to kick this off, but looks like it says
Yeah.
11 people. Of course,
Well,
I'm
we also
logged in
have,
6 times, but no, I'm kidding.
yeah, we also have, I'm not sure who it is here, but somebody from the Richmond Club. We were talking the other night, and somebody from the Richmond Club is going to
Oh,
join us.
great.
So hopefully we got a few of them too. So,
Fantastic. Good. Excellent. Okay. Well, if we want to kick it off, let me see if I can actually share. It looks like I have to send a request. That probably went to you. You probably have to approve. You have to approve my hijack of your screen or
okay,
something.
there you go. Did that work?
Well, let's try it. Yeah, that did. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and let's see. What do I want to do? I don't want to just, yeah, I just want to present my entire screen. That's what I want to do. There we go. That's better. Okay. Hmm. Let's see. Let me make things go away here so they're not in the way. All right, let me go ahead and kick this off then. Okay. Well, welcome to everybody who showed up. More than you than I honestly expected. So that's a good sign that we're starting off on the right foot here. This is the very first meeting, episode, whatever you want to call it, of what I think we're going to call the CAS Imaging Group. It didn't really have any official name. We just kept calling it Astrophotography with Jeff or whatever.
Yep. Uh-huh.
But
That's good.
yeah, let's go ahead and kick this off by giving an official name of CAS Imaging Group, and if anybody has a better idea, we'll take that under advisement and maybe do that a little differently. All right, so what we're going to do today is going to be a little different than I think how we're going to proceed in future meetings, and that's mostly because we don't honestly know what we're doing yet. When part of the purpose of today is to help us figure out exactly how we want to operate going forward. So the first thing we're going to do is review. We did have a couple of meetings before this that were not regular meetings. They were sort of introductory or tutorial meetings that we had. We'll review those and I'll point you to where the resources for those meetings are if you missed them and you'd like to see what we talked about. Then I would like to spend a little bit of time kicking off these monthly meetings discussing what you all would like to see from these meetings. These meetings aren't really intended to be for me personally, well, I mean, partly for me, but really for everybody to get what they would like to learn and build skills on out of this, right? And then we're going to take some time to answer a couple of questions. So today's more formal part or discussion part of this meeting, maybe the last half hour or so, or whatever it ends up being, we're going to talk about two questions that happened online. One on Slack, and then Kevin posted another one, I think, on groups.io. One from Tom, which is what comes after pre-processing. We did the processing tutorial back in October, I think it was, and we did some basic LRGB workflow that I demonstrated. And Tom's question is, well, what do we do after that? What about different objects, different types of things? What does that start to look like? And so I have a little discussion on that, and then we'll talk a little bit about Kevin's question, which is for those getting started, especially, are there required apps, websites, tools, whatever that are out there that are nice to have versus free? And I have a little resource I put together to we could talk through on that as well. All right, so heading into this summary thing, we back in September, when we first started kicking off this idea of having astrophotography training and meetings and so on within CAS. The first meeting we had, I presented, I don't remember how long that presentation was, an hour or so, a presentation called First Principles Astrophotography. It's a presentation that really just gets into the fundamental physics of things that you need to know. I have found in the past that even experienced astrophotographers tend not to know these things, even though it's really first principles. So it really just kind of gets down into the physics of the problem we're actually trying to solve, which is how do photons behave? What is signal? What is noise? And how do we best use our sensors to collect data? That presentation is out there, and I'll point you to where that is before we depart here today for those who want to tap into that. And then the second thing we did
For what
was,
it's worth, it's been a useful reference on multiple occasions, so thank you.
yeah, you bet. And I'm trying to collect all these things in one place because I realize that right now it's all fragmented. We put that thing out there on groups.io. It's buried now under 3,000 other messages that people are never going to find. So I'm trying to collect this all in one place, and I'll give you all a link to where that is. And then the second thing we did in October was our image processing tutorial, where I had provided everybody who wanted it within CAS a complete data set of LRGB data of Iris Nebula and surrounding area, lots of good dust and interesting things to look at there. And we basically gave everybody about a month, 4 weeks, something like that, to play with that data, see what they could do with it, get started. Part of the purpose was to get people who do not yet have an image processing toolkit put together. It gives them a motivation to do that. Start with maybe Serial, install that and figure out how to use Serial to take the data I gave you and how to stack images and then move forward in processing. And then we met on the 18th of October, and I demonstrated in real time, which is very dangerous, always dangerous, but I did it. I set a goal to finish in 2 hours, and I think we actually hit it like right on, right on the nose. 2 hours from beginning to end, pre-processing, linear processing, and nonlinear processing, and spit out a pretty decent image at the end of that 2 hours. And I think Kevin recorded that. And there is a link to a recording. I don't have the link to that recording. That's one thing we should add to our resources so that anybody who wants to see that processing session can go back and watch what we did there. So that's where we were, and here's where we are. So kicking this off, why are we here? Kevin and I had discussed and feel there's sufficient interest, and based on the number of you who actually showed up here today, I guess that's true. There is interest. We have a pretty good sized group here of interested parties who to justify that we see if we can kick off a series of monthly imaging specific meetings. So this is not to replace the CAS main meetings, but in addition to specifically for imagers or anybody who's interested in imaging, to learn and support, answer each other's questions, and, just plain to have fun with imaging in and of itself. So the format, we're going to try, and we'll keep this loose and figure it out as we go, is try to keep this to an hour. But some topics will take longer. There's an imaging group in another club I'm in, Northern Virginia Astronomy Club. There's an imaging group that meets every other month for 3 hours at a time. And I'll be honest with you, that gets a little hard to commit 3 hours on a Saturday afternoon when it's really nice outside. So we'll try to keep these non-intrusive but useful, maybe to an hour, sometimes a little bit more. I think we'll mostly do these via Zoom, and that's so that we can do some of the things like I'm going to do today, which is be able to put software on a screen and have you be able to read it rather than require everybody to go to LMO or something and try to squint at a screen. But we can be flexible. Sometimes maybe we want to do something like imaging demonstration out in the field or something. Maybe that's something that'll happen. I also think it makes sense to have sort of a featured topic each month. That really kind of depends on your feedback and that I not be the only speaker. In other words, we want to get multiple perspectives. I have a way I do things. I'm not going to pretend my way is the right way. It's the way I do things. And we should hear multiple speakers, multiple perspectives, and understand how everybody thinks about this problem. So if you have interest in giving a talk, come back and let me know, because we'll try to fill up the discussion agenda here as we go forward. So some suggested topics, really just anything that has to do with imaging. It could be simply, equipment tutorials and reviews. Hey, I'm a C-star expert. Here's what you need to know if you want to get a C-star. Here's what you need to buy. Here's what you don't buy. Here's how you use it. Here's how we process images, things like that. Tutorials on software. I know a lot about PixInsight and Nina. I know nothing or close to nothing about Serial, although I've been starting to use it a little more. Don't know nearly enough about Affinity. I have a lot to learn, and anybody who has expertise in any of these things and wants to take us through how to use these tools, we'd love to, queue you up for a future discussion on this. tutorials on techniques like you should focus before you do polar alignment. Might be a technique we want to have a little chat on. Uh, how do you adjust tilt and back? Whatever, right? Whatever you think is relevant, everybody needs to know. Tutorials on how to do some basic things, is pretty useful. How do you image particular types of objects? What's different about emission nebula versus reflection versus dark, galaxies, and so on. And then, again, personal perspectives. I don't want to be the one talking through all of these things because that's going to be a very monolithic way of thinking about imaging. I would love to hear, from a lot of different people. So, the first question is for this entire group here. Okay, let's go back one because we're gonna previous. So I'm gonna pause here, and this is a pre-planned built-in discussion point. To just pause here and hear from you, everybody out there. What would you like to hear? Any volunteers out there for future meetings? And feel free to hit me offline as well.
Well, Tom Black here. Just as a very top-down framing of this. All right, we looked at LRGB pre-processing previously. There's also going to be just broadband. There's a broadband workflow. There's also a simpler, like I tried for the first time at Woodbridge to use dual band filters, and just got a few images of Orion with both the hydrogen alpha and oxygen 3 filter and the sulfur 2 and oxygen 3. They look quite different. I haven't processed it yet, but different workflow, some commonality with the others. So you got those different categories, but then, well, within that, all right, what's the best way after you've done your pre-processing to process emission targets, to process non-emission nebulae, to process galaxies. It's and I know that there's some new tools for stretching and so on that have come up that I haven't experimented with much, but that's what I struggle with is the part after the pre-processing in terms of getting it to look, being able to properly control the brightness and color balance in the image. So it's a bit of a mystery to me. So that's my picture of the framework and where to start there. That I leave that to you because it's a big topic.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Anyone else have anything on their hit list of things that you'd like to see us cover in future topics?
Hey, Jeff, I'll jump in. So last night we were up at the LMO and we had a great like 1.5 hour conversation just on stellarium and what its capabilities are. So remember I sent something out a while back and said I was thrilled to see that there's Telescopius and that other software so you can before you go outside and spend 15 hours imaging, you can find out the ring nebula is going to be like a dit on my little tiny. So I think all that stuff for me, that's been my great learning thing since since over the holidays. And I'm maybe everybody else is ahead of me on that, but I think that's a pretty powerful set of tools to discuss. Before you go out, plan. In other words, maybe a plan before you go out, including things like focusing first before you do anything.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Things like that. Yep, for sure. Yeah. Some of those things that both Tom and Kevin just mentioned, we'll hit on some of those today with the second half hour or in a few minutes. I'll walk through some of those answers. Um, and if there's interest, we could plan a future entire segment on going into a deep dive on some of those things. By the way, that galaxy on the left there, that's fake, in case you didn't know. Any other high nails of topics that people would like to see covered? What is everybody using mostly for image processing at this point? What's the breakdown between people using Serial and PixInsight?
I'm using Cyril.
So I'm using Cyril and SETI Astro Pro a little bit with
Okay.
Affinity after that, but just started.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Serial is a really good place to start. And I've been impressed with Serial lately because of the scripting language being Python instead of JavaScript and PixInsight. It seems to be coming quicker to the market with some innovative scripts than PixInsight is at this point. PixInsight is still a more comprehensive image processing suite, but I've been increasingly adding Serial to my toolkit and reaching out and using Serial in particular steps. For example, Verilux, it is in PixInsight, but it's better in Serial. So if I want to try Verilux stretching, I'm going over to Serial at this point and trying it there. So it's really kind of an interesting time that there are so many different tools out there. So it would be interesting, I think, to have, if there's anybody out there that has pretty decent expertise in Serial and wants to give a talk, let me know. Or if there's interested in, getting somebody who knows Serial well to give a talk, I do know some people in other clubs that really know Serial inside and out. I could try to bring in and, kind of walk through that for people.
So Jeff, one of the reasons I liked the Cyril thing was when I was, and it didn't have any other software, so it was pretty easy. But I went to
Mhm.
Cyril, and then they have a tutorial, a guy who does tutorials, 1.4.1. And the
Yeah.
nice part about it was I had, I didn't even have the data together. So you start the tutorial, and the guy says, in order to do this, you got to do the following things: stop tutorial, go inside, get that all squared away. So it was really kind of, you could just use the tutorial to get you through the whole thing, and it got out the back end just fine. It worked pretty nice.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the image that you posted on Slack was a pretty darn good image. I mean, not just for a beginner, that was actually a really good image. So, that worked out pretty well for you. It's one thing, PixInsight, the one of the major criticisms of PixInsight is only certain things are documented. They're trying to do better. They have a new YouTube channel where you can learn a lot about PixInsight and get overviews on their YouTube channel. And there's no lack of YouTubers with, PixInsight tutorials and tips out there. The problem is almost there are too many YouTubers out there with PixInsight videos, and many of them are not very good at what they're talking about. So your mileage may vary depending on which ones you're tuning into. Um, but yeah, that's definitely maybe 2, 3 years ago, if anybody asked what you're using for image processing, the answer was always going to be PixInsight. I mean, everybody used PixInsight, but now there's Serial and other tools coming up and I see more and more people moving off to Photoshop and Affinity for parts of their processing
Mhm.
workflow as well. And, that's something I've been playing with Affinity. I'm certainly not an expert in Affinity. So anybody who knows anything about Affinity or Photoshop, probably Affinity because it's free. I like Affinity better than Photoshop because it's free. Um, that would be a interesting thing for me is to get a tutorial on that. In fact, is Terry Duran on?
I don't see him on here,
He's
Jeff.
not on there? Okay. I know Terry uses Affinity quite a bit. I might have to poke him. and see if he could do a talk on affinity.
Hey, Joe, didn't you say you were messing with Affinity or no?
I picked it up. I just got my DC back up and running, so I'm just starting to reload data to it. So it was one of my intent. I actually paid for Affinity before it became a free product. So
Yeah, same
um,
here.
I'll be I'll be digging into that.
Yeah,
Yes.
I had the $69 Affinity 2, and then with Affinity
Yeah.
3, it went free.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That's me.
yeah,
Uh,
exactly. It's very powerful. I have played with
oh yeah.
Affinity. It's very, very powerful. I just haven't quite figured out the best use of it yet for astronomical image processing. And that's where, anybody who has expertise in that, it might be very, very interesting to hear on that. Um, okay. I think I'm gonna, unless anybody has other topics they want to throw out right now or particular questions they want to have answered, I think a good thing going forward is um, to make these meetings useful to as many people as possible. We really need to hear from you what it is your questions are and what you want to learn and where you're stumbling and things like that, right? That way I know, who to reach out to see if they can give a talk, or if it's something I know about, I can do the talk or whatever. But to keep these meetings educational for everybody, it would be useful to know what everybody wants to hear about most. So, put your suggestions out there, either groups.io or Slack in the astrophotography channel, or reach out to me directly, however you want to do it. And I view myself as more the MC of these meetings. I certainly know things and can help people get going, and will be happy to give, some of these discussions, but I'm not the expert in everything. Don't ask me anything about planetary imaging. Don't know it. There's a lot for everybody to learn. So depending on what your questions are, I'll definitely be reaching out and finding the right people. But I first need to know what it is that you want to know about. So keep it. We'll keep it moving, and all suggestions are welcome, because we don't know what we're doing. As I said right up front, this is our very first one of these, and we're going to figure it out as we go forward. All right, so I'm going to go on to the next part here, which is to answer those questions. And Tom just kind of enumerated, one of these, and we'll see if I cover this adequately for Tom, or he'd like a deeper dive on any particular area, and then we'll take note of that for future meetings if we need to. So his first question was, what comes after pre-processing? We did the LRGB workflow, but as Tom was mentioning, he collects some narrowband data, and things suddenly got different. Things got wonky very, very quickly. So, how does this differ for various objects? And I'm going to start out by breaking out of PowerPoint here for a minute, but introducing, there's a website out there. It's in French. That's why that first word there might be a little unfamiliar. It's in French, but the workflows are not. This guy, his website, Philippe Bernard, took time to put together a whole bunch of different workflows for different types of objects or different types of data sets, and demonstrate those. Now, these workflows are primarily for PixInsight, but Serial PixInsight, you're just going to have to map, to the serial processes, because it's not so much the process as what's happening in these different boxes here. But it's pretty straightforward, right? So if, for example, this is just one of the many, workflows he puts out there. And this is basically just saying, if I have a one-shot color camera and if I have a stack of color one-shot color data, I'm going to stack that, and I'm going to have a crop it, and I'm going to have an RGB color stack. I'm first going to correct the gradients in there, Graxpert or whatever is in Serial, and then it's going to be corrected. I'm going to neutralize the background. I am going to do deconvolution. I am going to color calibrate. I am going to remove the stars. I am going to, do denoising. Okay, and now I have a stars image and I have a starless image. I am going to stretch with GHS. Now today, that's probably changes because we have a lot of new stretchers have just suddenly hit the market. We now have an abundance of new stretching tools available to us. But I'm going to take this linear image and I'm going to stretch it to make it nonlinear and do the same thing with the stars. And here he's saying I'm using SETI Astro's star stretch tool. And then I play with this nonlinear image and I'm going to boost the colors and do a lot of, different wacky things that are in this box. And then I'm going to screen the stars back in and I'm done. So here's a workflow. You can do this in Serial. You can do this in PixInsight. And I'm going to now go right to his website where you can see all these different workflows that he has there. And that link in this presentation is a hot link, as you just saw. So it goes right to this website. And here are all these workflows. So if I have a one-shot color camera, I'm going to look at these 5 different workflows. If I have a mono camera, I'm going to look at these workflows for LRGB, RGB, and HA enhanced RGB images. Okay. And if I am doing narrowband imaging with monochrome camera, I'm going to look at these workflows. And if it's HOO, it's here. If it's SHO, I collected Sulfur 2 data. I have these workflows down here. And there's even a legend down here and so on and so forth. So all these workflows are sitting right here. Are they the only way to do it? No, these are really good reference workflows. If you really want to know what to do, you'd start with that. So for example, Tom just mentioned that he did a dual band, I think it was, of H and O
Yes,
with a bunch.
I purchased 2 dual band filters. One's hydrogen alpha and oxygen 3. The other is sulfur 2 and oxygen 3.
Okay. Okay.
Was able to take a little bit of data on the Orion Nebula with both. And they look quite different in the 2 different filters, but I haven't yet
Yeah.
had the time to attempt to process it.
Okay, so this is the workflow that would apply to what you just said right here. Here's a simplified processing of one-shot color with dual band HAO3 and S2O3 images. So you have 2 different stacks, right? That look differently. And you can follow this as easily as I can. Gradient correction, noise reduction, and then there's a script out there, and I'm sure Serial has something like this as well, called dual band extract, which separates those. Okay, so you can use DB extract to take your dual narrowband data and create pure S2HA and O3 masters. Now you're from here processing just like we mono imagers are. Which is I now have mono data in effect. I have extracted it from my dual narrowband filters of S2HAO3, and I'm going to go through the deconvolution, star extraction. I'm going to do the stretching of each one, and then I'm going to combine them. And then I am going to do magic mixing things, narrowband normalization. You're going to find these same things in Serial. They're just going to be called something differently. But there's a workflow right here that explains to you what that looks like, right? So this website is very, very useful, right? It doesn't explain every way that you could possibly do narrowband combination of data. Sometimes you will combine it, the SH and O linear, and then do the stretch. You might find that works best. But as a baseline of how to go forward and do things, these workflows are actually really, really, quite good. So I'm going to go back here to this, and then the next question is, all right, so given those workflows, what type of data is typical for different types of objects? And I made this little table here And I have a lot of, I'm an engineer, so you get a lot of, it depends. In this table, right? Sometimes we do it this way, sometimes we have this data, it really kind of depends on the particular object, not just the class of object. If it's a reflection nebula like Iris Nebula, LRGB usually, but sometimes you have a reflection nebula with a really neat HA, hydrogen alpha out there. Sometimes, very rarely, there might even be O3 and maybe even S2. Dark nebula, dusty things, LRGB usually, but sometimes, there's this other stuff. Globular clusters, it's really all about the LRGB. Galaxies, LRGB HA is pretty typical, sometimes just LRGB. And if it's an emission nebula, you're focusing more on the HA, S2, and O3, but sometimes, you might also have some of this other data, especially RGB, if you want to have natural colored stars as opposed to narrowband colored stars, and you want to get some straight up RGB data. Just some examples here, some of my own images of, Mission Nebula, why it depends, because each emission nebula is very different. What data is there? You really have to kind of look at the object itself in detail to understand the data and therefore how you want to attack it. And you need to do that planning right up front before you even start collecting data, in my opinion. You should have some idea of how you're going to compose this data at the end. So, for example, SH2115, this image here on the left, it's pretty much a straight up SHO emission nebula with sulfur 2, hydrogen alpha, oxygen 3. Data is the primary, and then a little bit of RGB data just for the stars, just to make sure that the stars are the right color. And then over here on the right is another way that emission nebula get accommodated, which is sometimes I have some really cool reflection nebula, like we have in this picture here. There's reflection nebula all over the place. And so the underlying fabric of this is really LRGB, but then I blend in the HA, which gives you all this red puffy stuff all over the place. Without that extra HA, it would be a little bit anemic in the red. It'd be there, but it's a little bit weak. If I really want to accentuate the red and show you all that extra detail and these nice filaments here and whatever else, then I have that additional HA data, and then I blend that in. But how I blend it in here, totally different from how it's blended in over there with SH2115. And then in the middle here, again, why does it depend? Nobody, and I mean nobody, ever does LRGB O3. It's always LRGB HA. Nobody does O3 separately and then blends that into LRGB, except I did it here. It's crazy, but that's what I did. And it turned out to be actually a really cool image. Why did I do that? That's because O3 is naturally green blue. It's right in the line between green and blue. It's, sort of a greenish, lightish blue, greenish thing. If you just do LRGB of the California nebula, it's of course going to be red. Why? Because most emission nebula are red dominant, HA dominant. And so HA is in the red part of the spectrum. And so it's going to be a red shape there. When people do emission nebula version of California, they'll get HA and O3 and even S2. And then you get a very different color palette when you blend in this, typical Hubble. But the O3 part, that forms the water here, always comes up blue. What I did in this particular image is I wanted the natural color of California, but I wanted the blue water. And so I did O3 and I blended it in that way. And it turned out to actually be a really cool image. And this is one I actually collected in my backyard here, only about 12 hours of data, I think. And, came out really, really nice. So this is one that you could do easily, around here, anywhere around Charlottesville.
Cool.
But yeah. So, having an idea of where you're going to go with that image is ultimately going to tell you, obviously, what data you have to collect, but then which of those workflows even make sense and which techniques you're using to blend this data together. So, like I said, the way I would blend HA or O3 into an LRGB is totally different from how I do things over here. When I do a straight up emission nebula in the Hubble palette with RGB stars. Those are two totally different processing workflows. But that website I just pointed to you to kind of has all of that together. So, when you put it
Question
all together, yeah, go ahead.
about the Hubble pellet specifically that, I mean, all right, you got HE mapped to red, you've got O3 mapped to blue. Um, with sulfur 2, my understanding is you typically will map that to green.
Well, that would be HSO. So SHO is S2 is mapped to red, HA
Okay.
is mapped to green, and O3 is mapped to
Okay.
blue. But if you go and just compose that and you push the, combination button, what you're going to get is a very green image. It's like
Right.
massively green. And the reason is, of course, because the HA signal in most emission nebula is just so much stronger than everything else. So you have a couple of different ways to deal with that. One is that you can do color calibration, you can do curves, you can pull the green down and you can push the reds up. You can do all kinds of wonky things to try and manage that greenness. Another way to do it is what was kind of suggested on that website, which is if you stretch the S2HA and O3 separately, then you can use a palette that's known as 4-ax. And you can go look that up. I'm sure there's a script in Cyril that does something with 4-ax. But 4-ax is a set of equations basically that creates really nice SHO images without the dominance of green.
Okay.
It
All right.
preserves the HA data, but does not force that HA to be green, essentially. HA
Okay.
will find its way into other channels.
I see.
So 4-ax is quite popular. A lot of people love it. Some people hate it, but it's not a bad place to start if you have S2HA and O3 data. Take a look at 4-ax. You can always just do straight up SHO combination and play with curves and do all the other games. Um, the nice thing about SHO, the stuff here on the left is it's purely false color, right? The Hubble mapping is totally fake. Well, I mean, kind of fake. S2 really is red, HA is red, not green, and O3 really is, bluish. So, these blue regions really are blue. They're just not as prominent, as in the real object if you were looking at it visually.
Mhm.
So you have a lot of freedom to play around when you're doing a narrowband image. Nobody's going to criticize you because at the end of the day, it's all false color. Hubble's is false color too. It's not that that's a bad thing. It's all false color. So you can play around with the color combinations until you find something you like. These things on the right over here, however, slightly different rules apply if there are any rules at all. It's your data. So I say your data, you can do with it whatever you want. But the rules here would be, unspoken rules, unwritten rules are if you're enhancing an LRGB image with narrowband, then you're trying to stay a little bit more true to the true color. You're simply enhancing it to bring out additional detail that you wouldn't get without that narrowband data, right?
Right.
So I'm enhancing the red, I'm enhancing the detail. I'm not totally doing a false color here. If I brought in the HA as green, that would be really bad, right? Really
Mhm.
dumb and bad. Similarly, over here, when I did LRGB 03, I kept my O3 blue, but that was the desired effect, was to
Sure. And
add
it's really there. It's just, it's not very prominent.
it's not prominent. I'm
Yeah.
pushing it into a place where it's visible to,
Mhm.
create a more interesting image than if we did only true color on emission nebula, you're just looking at red. Not that that's a bad thing. Natural color is nice, but it's always going to be red, right? So, pushing things this way and that to add and enhance different colors, is the norm, quite often when doing a mission nebula. But the rules kind of go out the door a little bit when you're doing a mission nebula because, there's a lot of false color at play here. And we're doing narrowband to get that detail that simply would not be there in the broadband, if we were only looking at broadband. When I'm doing a galaxy, let me go back here. If I'm doing these first four things, like a reflection nebula, dark nebula, globular cluster, or a galaxy, the rules are a little different. The rules in this case are true color is of greater interest than false color, right? So I personally am trying to stay closer to the true color if I'm doing those things. I might be enhancing again with some narrowband to bring out some additional details, but I am generally trying to stay with true color, where emission nebula, the rules are now breaking. It's a totally different paradigm. False color, go have fun, right? So true color is where it's at. Now that said, if you go on Astrobin and you look at image of the day, quite often the things that win are where somebody got really crazy with the color, or the saturation. So Astrobin, they like to give awards to people who break those rules, But if you want a nice image, and you don't care about cookies from Astrobin, then you are probably better off staying closer to true color than not, in my opinion.
Okay.
But that's my style. Your style, you get to make up your own. If you want to make, red, green, blue, blue, green, red, you go for it.
Let me make a comment for context for some of the people listening, that Kevin and I both have essentially the same rig, a few differences, but we've kind of taken the baby step of getting a filter drawer, which will take one filter at a time. So we're using one-shot color cameras, but we're also can do one filter at a time, and that is kind of a baby step into doing the narrowband stuff, where it's not going to the full get a model camera with a complete filter wheel and all of that, but definitely this is really valuable to learn how to take even that first step. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, a lot of experienced imagers use one-shot color cameras too. So it's not necessarily, that you're doing something that's just for beginners. Chuck Mills, I don't know if Chuck is on, but Chuck Mills is in the process of sending a William Optics 108 millimeter scope with a one-shot color camera out to the same remote site I'm at. So he'll be set up, yeah, like in another couple of weeks, he'll have a scope out there with a one-shot color camera. No shame in that.
okay.
So he'll be doing some high-end imaging with exactly that. So he has a filter wheel on there, so his dual narrowband filters are in a filter wheel. He can just dial up whichever one he wants automatically. But yeah, there's no shame in one-shot color, not in my opinion. Okay, so I'm going to just, summarize what we just said, which is, again, most of these images, broadband, narrowband, what are the rules and so on, which workflows are we looking at? And there's really three broad classes of images I think you're going to find out there. There are those that are purely broadband. Okay. These are LRGB, the dusty things, reflection nebula, galaxies, and so on. You want true color. You want to make it, look as pure as you can, not get too crazy unless you're going for an award on Astrobin. And then there's the narrow band, straight up HOO and SHO workflows. Possibly you're collecting RGB data separately just for the stars so that they're natural. And then you're going to screen that in at some point. And then there are those class of things like I was showing you where I have broadband enhanced by narrowband, whether it's LRGB HA or O3 or some other crazy thing, but it's predominantly a broadband object. But I happen to know that there's some interesting narrowband data in that field that I would like to show. And so I will collect that data and I will blend that in. And you're going to find that the way that you handle these three different classes of things, that's where things get a little bit different. You can look at those workflows. It'll probably help when you get to the point where you want to do one of these things that we have a demonstration session and I can show you exactly what that actually looks like. You can look at the math and the workflows and everything. It's always worth playing around. No harm in playing around, but a demonstration might be worth doing. Um, and just to close this part out, my advice is plan your palette when you plan your project. If you're going to do California Nebula, am I going to do it SHO? Am I going to do it natural color? Am I going to enhance that color with some narrowband data? It's always good to look at Telescopius and Astrobin to see how others have imaged the same object. I often do that. If I'm going to set up a project to image, I'll get onto Astrobin and see, what combinations have people used, what makes sense, is there something, that's of interest, how much data did they need to collect of something. Those reference workflows I just showed you on that website, they're a baseline, not your final answer. You're probably going to, morph that or see people do other things that are different. That's good. That's fine. And don't be afraid to experiment, like LRGB O3, who'da thunk, but, kind of worked out, right? Now I'm going to go to the next question that Kevin had, and I'm going to switch out of PowerPoint here to answer it. So Kevin had let's see, and show. Let's go back here, close this. So here's what I've done. First of all, is I have created a Google Drive folder. Now this is in my own Google Drive for now. I think there's a CAS one, so we might move this over there at some point if that makes sense. But I have shared this. Everybody can view it. You can't write to it, and the reason is I don't want you uploading viruses to my computer. But you're free to pull everything off of there. And the last slide of that presentation that I will post on groups.io and Slack has the link to this Google Drive folder. What you're going to see here is the processing tutorial and even including the data that we process, the PixInsight project, and the processing workflows that we followed in that particular tutorial that we did. This meetings folder here where you're going to find the presentation that I was just showing you, and also any resources that make sense. And so in this resources, you're going to find that first principles astrophotography presentation from that very first meeting we did, and two other tools that I'm about to show you to answer Kevin's question. So the
Hey,
first
hey,
one,
hey,
yep.
Jeff, one quick one for you. In the beginning of this meeting here, I set up a CAS Google Drive. It's called CAS Imaging Group under CAS Materials. So when we get to
Oh,
the end, I'll show you where it is. I'll make sure everybody here is invited to it. And
okay,
and Jeff, you'll have editing capability, and then we just got to figure out what we do with everybody else. So anyway, at
great.
the end, I'll
Then
show you that.
then ignore my link to that. The exact same material I just showed you is going to end up on the link that Kevin shares to everybody. Okay. So I'm going to show these last two tools to answer Kevin's question. So the first one is Kevin asked what tools are must-haves versus nice-to-haves and so on. So this spreadsheet, it's not going to be complete. Somebody's going to look at this and say, well, you forgot about this tool or that one. That's perfectly fine. Just let me know and I'll add that additional information to this sheet so that everybody has it. This is just the things I know about and whether or not I use them myself or can recommend them. So if it's green, I am recommending it based on my personal experience. If there's a yellow, I'm warning you that it's getting old and people are walking away from those tools. And if it's red, I do not recommend it. And if it's not colored at all, it's because I have no experience with it at all. It doesn't mean it's bad. So I organized this with a set of tabs across the bottom. Let me expand this so everybody can see it. Then this goes left to right. What types of tools would you need? Well, to help with imaging system design, target planning, doing imaging itself, image processing, and gallery. How do you display your images? So if you go through these tabs left to right, for example, for imaging system design, I have pointed people to in the past to astronomy.tools, which has a bunch of free calculators that are very good about, helping you figure out if the camera that you're thinking about for that telescope makes sense and whether that telescope focal length and field of view with that camera will cover the types of objects I want to be able to image and so on. Astronomy.tools has got a lot of really useful calculators. And the other one I recommend is the book, Deep Sky Imaging Primer by Charlie Bracken, which is far more comprehensive, maybe more comprehensive than a lot of people need. But it basically has all the equations that astronomy.tools has already implemented, but also the discussion as to what types of things you should be thinking about when putting together a new system. For target planning, like we were just talking about, and Kevin's been talking about up front, these are the four things that I use, and there are additional tools that are out there, but I think these first four tools are probably far better for planning targets than anything else. So the first one
Jeff,
is called,
could you
yep,
zoom a bit there? It's a little hard to read on screen.
yeah, I can do, yeah, look at that. How about that?
Thank you.
Look at that. There we go. Yeah, that's awesome. That's much better. Okay, so for the target planning, we talked about Telescopius, and if you, what's going on here? Hold on. What's nice about Telescopius, where is, I see, a little toolbar is being hidden down there. That's why I'm not seeing. Ugh. Okay. Let's do it like this and get it down here. Telescopius, are you up here somewhere? Yeah, here's Telescopius. So if you're not familiar with Telescopius, what's nice about Telescopius is you can type in your coordinates, where am I, create an account, put in your location, and it gives you a lot of information very quickly. Like, for example, it's new moon. That's very, very good thing, except the clouds and whatnot. And then if you click the targets tab, it gives you a lot of really interesting target suggestions for your location, shows you the transit times, rise, set, and so on. You can find things you're interested in. Like I'll click Horsehead Nebula here, and it's going to give me far more information on it, including recommendations on which filters to use on which days based on the moon state, right? We're at new moon, so anything is fair game. Later on, gradually, we're going to, lose, access to things. And even better, down below is a telescope simulator. So you can plug in your particular telescopes, like I have here, and my camera, and I can do framing of that object immediately and see that this is a really good object for my scope, for that imaging system. So Telescopius is very, very powerful and useful, but there are other tools out there too. I use Astrobin quite a bit. I'll, talk more about Astrobin when we get to the gallery page. And Nina also, if you use Nina for your imaging, has a framing assistant that's very, very useful and very similar to using something like Stellarium. So the nice thing about Nina with its framing assistant is once you frame something up, you can send it right to the target planner or right to your sequence, and it will use exactly that framing that you saw to do your imaging. for that object. The second one is the thing I'm going to show you, and this is in that resources folder that everybody's going to have a link to here in a little bit. This is a very useful thing for finding targets you may not have known about. So Gary M., very experienced imager, he has some books published out there, but also on his website, he publishes this. And he updates it periodically, and I put a copy of it in the resources folder. It's what he calls his Deep Sky Compendium. It's a pretty comprehensive list of an awful lot of stuff. So if you want to find a target for tonight, or a couple nights from now when it's going to actually be clear, plug in the date, click sunset, make sure you've got your coordinates in there. Okay, those are my coordinates. And it tells you things like that it's a new moon, what's the moon state that we're dealing with right now. And then it's going to give you a whole lot of stuff. So I can do a transit time sort, and then it starts showing me the greens are when that object is up. And then, of course, when it gets yellow and red, that means it's getting closer to the horizon or below the horizon, and that's not a very good object. And now it's giving me a lot of information, including moon separation. Well, the moon separation right now is very, very good because it's new moon. No moon issues to worry about. It tells me how much imaging time I'm going to have on this object tonight if I want to do it. And, so on. Now, the only problem is, of course, I have about 454 shown. Why are only 454 shown? Okay. There are 3,145 objects on my list right now, just based on those initial filters, right? And if okay, it's when I hit the transit time sort. So once I filter that based on transit time, it brought it down to 454. That's still a lot of objects. I can also filter on the size of the object. Like if I have a sensor with a field of view of 3 by 2 degrees, which is what I have on my remote scope, I probably don't have a whole lot of interest in objects that are below 30 arc minutes. So I have a filter on there that I can click that and filter this list further. Oh, I guess it already did because that was already implemented. And then I can, there are like different rankings here. I can even choose the top 10% of the targets or whatever. Or I can scroll over here and let's say I'm only interested in supernova remnants. That sounds like a nice subject. Only interested in supernova remnants. It'll filter it based on that. And now it's going through and it's reduced it to 26 objects that are of interest. Now, the one that looks pretty cool here is here because of the transit times. It looks like it's going to be above my horizon all night. There it is, G156 plus 2, and so on. I can now click that object and it takes me, lo and behold, right to Gary M's Astrobin page, and I can see what he did with it. See exactly what that object looks like. Or I can click the Simbad link, and it's going to bring me to the Simbad database and show me all the information I need to know about this object as well. But by going right to Gary M's page, I got a lot of information about how he imaged it as an RGB HAO3 object and so on. Do I want to set that up? So this is a really, if you want, to me, this is the Cadillac. This is the best tool you're going to find for finding objects that you may not know about. Now, early in your astrophotography journey, you're probably going to want to stick closer to what's known as the astrophotography canon, the top 100 objects, Horsehead Nebula and Orion and things like that. Definitely need to do those things before you start looking for more exotic supernova remnants or whatever else. But this is a really useful tool for helping you filter out what makes sense for you tonight from your location based on, what you're looking to do. Okay. The rest of this, is software for doing imaging itself, meaning running an imaging session, ASI Air. a lot of people will use once you're done with that, or you find you want to use cameras other than ZWO cameras, you're going to go to Nina typically. There's a suite of tools in here that I have touched all of those things, and they are red because of my direct experience. And then the yellow ones are things that used to be popular but really aren't popular anymore. And in some cases, they are on their way out of being supported even. So there's no point in starting with these tools when free things are so much better. For image processing, this is the tool suite I use for the most part. Other tools here are available and may be of interest to you. And then finally on the gallery, I pretty much use Astrobin. I have uploaded to Telescopius. So Telescopius, you can also upload your images. It's kind of a gallery, but not quite the same as Astrobin. So I think for today, I'm going to close out just by giving you a quick look at Astrobin. If you're not familiar with Astrobin, you should be, and you should get on Astrobin at some point. I think you can start free for your first few objects or so, if I'm remembering right, and then it becomes a for pay image gallery thing.
Not terribly expensive. I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's
It's
not.
40 bucks a year, I think, something like that. It's not terribly expensive, and it's worth doing. So what do you get when you get on Astrobin? Well, first of all, this is the one thing that all astrophotographers use. Every single astrophotographer. Oh, that's a really nice image there, by the way. All all astrophotographers pretty much have Astrobin. Um, so it has multiple things. First of all, there are the forums here. So if you have a question on astrophotography, feel free to post on here. And most people will post. Especially if you want to get a wide swath of opinions on something. Worldwide, the guy who develops this is in Italy, and this is used by astrophotographers all over the world. Then you can also see what people are posting. So in real time, this updates down here what everybody has posted. You can like the images, you can look at them, get greater detail on them. And then, of course, if you have a subscription, you have your own page. Here's mine, which shows you everything you've ever done. And if you submit for image of the day on Astrobin, I go through periods where I don't, and then sometimes I remember, and then I'll submit 5 at once, and that's kind of where I am. I submitted 5 at once, and 2 of them are still being adjudicated here, including that one.
What reaction have you gotten to the California Nebula image with the O3?
Yeah, so this one is actually, if you look at it, what this tells me is it's already been nominated to the top pick level, and it hasn't been kicked out of Image of the Day consideration. Could make it, not likely, but it could make it as Image of the Day. But they have different award levels. So if you want, a neutral review of your progress, um, they go in 3 levels. Top pick nomination, you get to the nomination stage, and then there's the top pick stage, which is this little star. And then there's the image of the day, which you have to, it's basically a roll of the dice, if it's image of the day. And, it's worth getting that feedback, especially early on, to see if you're on track. If you look at some of my early images, I keep this image around. This is one of my very first images, like over 5 years ago, coming up on 6 years. It's a terrible image. It was bad back then. Somehow it got a top pick nomination. So don't take these awards too seriously. But it's useful to get a little bit of feedback just to see, if neutral reviewers actually think there's any value in what you're doing. And if not, don't take it too hard if they don't like it. If you like it, that's actually all that matters out of the whole thing. But also, this makes it very easy to share things to other forums. So, like if I wanted to share, this garlic nebula here, like this image, here's an example of an image. I thought this was a really nice image. I got like 115 hours of data in this. I submitted this one to The reviewers at Astrobin, nobody liked it. It got no votes. It's like, wow, that's really kind of crazy. I thought it was good, but who cares? Makes it very easy to share. So if you wanted to share this to like the CAS forums,
Slack, yeah, I
yeah,
typically, so I don't take up space.
yeah, that way you're
I'll,
not taking up any space. You're just putting in the link. You're not using any server space on groups.io or whatever else. Just do that, post it, and there you go. And what's nice about this too is, again, if you're planning an object, it's very easy to, go in there. Like, let's say, I don't know, I'm gonna image M42. I'm just gonna search M42 and I'm gonna find one that I like. Ooh, I don't like that one. Let's just tell you that's very bright. Um, let's say this one. This is a pretty good image of M42, at least based on the thumbnail. If I click it now, I can see exactly, yeah, see the trapezium stars are preserved. They did a pretty nice job. I can now see exactly what they did. I got a really good example of what equipment did they use, what camera, what filters, uh, and how much time did they take in each filter, right?
Mhm.
And helps you plan your own projects. Um, from that. So I highly recommend, from the tools that we were just looking at, if it's in green, I highly recommend, taking a look at it at least. You know, think about using that Deep Sky Compendium, help you filter out top, different objects to image. Take a look at Astrobin, use Telescopius. Telescopius, if you sign up for Telescopius, they'll send you an email every month with target suggestions for that month for you to take a look at. So, especially take advantage of the free tools, but there's a lot of value in what's there. So let's see. I think that's pretty much it. That's all I had for this month to address those particular questions. I'll change that link to the one that Kevin's going to send out, and then I'm going to upload all of that stuff that we just showed into those folders, and
Okay.
that will,
Um, for future sessions, I'll throw out a couple specific things.
yeah,
Uh, one is just broadband galaxies, just doing that right, uh,
okay,
and maybe just walk through an example perhaps, um, uh, and then um, uh, a little bit more about deconvolution and what it is and how to use it properly.
okay, and deconvolution. That second one is going to be interesting, and the reason is because there's before Blur Exterminator and after Blur Exterminator are those answers.
Mm.
Before Blur Exterminator, deconvolution was extremely challenging, at least in PixInsight. I'll have to take a look at the tools in Serial and play around with them and see if they're better. But the principle of deconvolution is, what we are imaging is coming through layers of atmosphere and seeing effects and other atmospheric, effects, so that there is a blurring of all the data that we are collecting. Deconvolution is just like it sounds like. If convolution is blurring, deconvolution is about deblurring that data and trying to recover it as it, would have been if we could remove those effects. Trying to. Um, so the deconvolution tools in PixInsight, the native ones used wavelet processing, which is a signal processing technique that is particularly good at doing exactly that sort of thing. The problem is it's very hard and unwieldy to use. 2, 3 years ago, Russ Croman came out with Blur Exterminator, and so when you see in those workflows, on that website I just pointed you to references to blur exterminator, star exterminator, noise exterminator. That's because Russ Kroman pretty much revolutionized those three particular processes with these AI-based tools that were tuned and trained specifically on astronomical data. So Blur Exterminator does deconvolution with AI, and it works so well, nobody does it any other way anymore. It is currently probably, and it's not even part of PixInsight. You have to pay extra. You have to go to Russ Kroman and pay him to get Blur Exterminator, but it only operates within PixInsight, unfortunately. So if you're using PixInsight and you're using Blur Exterminator, deconvolution is now just extremely easy and saves you a huge amount of time and gets you outstanding results. So much so that, not only does it do deconvolution, it also corrects aberrations in your stars to such a degree that people used to be very, very careful about tilt adjustment on their cameras, meaning how well the camera was aligned to the focal plane, because if it was just even slightly misaligned, especially in a fast scope, you get all kinds of nasty effects on your stars. Or maybe your backspacing is not perfect. You're going to get weird stars in the corners, and there's simply no way to deal with that other than Blur Exterminator. So now people are worrying less about tilt. They're getting it about right, but not fretting about too much more than that, and able to get fabulous stars because Blur Exterminator is able to correct the aberrations in addition to doing deconvolution. If I had one recommendation of a tool on this image processing page, it's yes, Blur Exterminator is the one thing that is absolutely worth the price. The only problem is you also have to buy PixInsight to use it. There's no standalone way to use Blur Exterminator. But if you bite the bullet and you create a PixInsight based image processing suite, you'll have PixInsight, Blur Exterminator, Noise Exterminator, Star Exterminator. I use Serial now for some of the stretching, like Verilux stretching. I've been playing with that, so I'm finding uses for Serial that are it's quite good at those types of things. And then Affinity, I'm going to reach out to Terry Duran. I would like to see how he uses Affinity and see if he can give us a little presentation on that. But I do know a lot of people are starting to stop using PixInsight for nonlinear processing. They're using PixInsight for these first two things, doing these tools here in the linear state, and then they're going off to Photoshop or Affinity to do those last things. And this would be this green tool suite. If I had a recommendation on how to make your life easier, this is it. Get the green stuff.
Hey Jeff,
Yep.
we got three questions from Joe Mello in the chat. I don't know if you can open the chat.
Oh, I probably have to stop sharing. Now I can see the chat. There we go. All right. There we are. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, so Milky Way astrophotography, there's a guy in unless there's anybody in CAS who's really good at it, and I haven't seen that. I know a guy who I think we can invite to do that for us in Northern Virginia. For culling images and subs, what are considered good levels for FWHM eccentricity or other quantitative measures? Those are good questions. Um, a lot of it really depends on your particular equipment, but I think my answer to that is different today than it depends on which image processing software I'm using, to be honest. If it's PixInsight, I cull using blink, and meaning visually. If I see obvious aberrations in an image like clouds or, something really bad, I'll throw away that image. Otherwise, even if it's a high FWHM or eccentricity, I throw it into the mix. And the reason is in PixInsight, the image weighting algorithms are now so good that they will recognize the high FWHM and eccentricity images and just punish them with a really bad weight. So even though it might include it, it's harmless, right? It's not, it makes my life much easier to use WBPP in PixInsight. If I was doing it in Serial, yeah, I'm going to get a little bit more picky about what goes in and what doesn't. Serial does a really nice job of stacking. And, don't get me.
Serial does weight based on full width half maximum is one of the options. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So there may be ways to deal with some of those things, but PixInsight has a couple of weighting schemes they added in the last couple of years that are particularly good. PSF scale SNR and PSF weight SNR, meaning it's really looking at the point spread function of the stars and using that to weight it. So if I have a high eccentricity star or something that's really out of focus, that image is going to get punished automatically because it recognizes those conditions on the stars themselves. Okay.
So Jeff, you got another session topic. Are you jotting down the session topics? So
I'm writing them down right
good.
here. Yeah. So
Excellent.
session ways to print images, upscale accurate. Yeah. Okay. Printing.
And then Dimitro has one also.
Yeah. Affinity, Serial, other free tools. Okay.
So you're covering some of that today. So
Yeah. So I personally would love to see a tutorial on Serial because I think, first a lot of people start there if they don't
There,
even finish
there's
there.
one YouTube channel. I think it's Deep Space Astro. I forget the guy's name, but he does really good um, uh, uh, talks on different aspects of Serial.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
that's
Rich at Deep Space Astro.
Okay.
that's what I mentioned earlier when I was trying to figure out how to use Serial and I had my data. I would turn that guy on. He would say 17 words. I had to stop it and then do what he said and then go again. And I got through the whole thing and came out with a half decent picture. So I think the tutorial, I'll see if I can find the name and get that back to them.
Quite often these online tutorials really are the way to go. So for PixInsight, what I recommend, if you pick up PixInsight and you want to get into that, which I'll just predict that most of you here are sooner or later going to end up on PixInsight. Okay. Um, when you get to PixInsight, Adam Block, for example, I think for $60 he has something called his Fast Track. I think he calls it PixInsight Fast Track. And it's a set of tutorial videos on how to get going with PixInsight very, very quickly. And it's worth the money. If sit there and struggle with PixInsight, you're going to find yourself just saying, yeah, screw it, pay the $60 and figure it out. It'll get you going very, very quickly.
Let
Adam
me,
also has a lot of free videos online, but his good stuff, unfortunately, you have to pay for.
gotcha.
So on the last comment, Affinity Serial, other free tools, plus filters. By filters, do you mean astronomical filters, LRGB?
Yep, I'm just curious, kind of what they do and how much they cost, and before
Okay.
you spend money on it, is it actually worth it, And I think you kind of showed the table already, but yeah, sometimes it's curious if you spend, $200 per filter, and is there actually benefit on using them? And while we're at it, I think you guys mentioned multiple times one-shot camera today. What did you mean by that? Is that the mono color or is it RGB color? What does one-shot mean?
Yeah, the one-shot color camera is basically, yeah, it's an RGB camera, right? So as opposed to monochrome camera with a filter wheel. So, if you're doing monochrome camera, it's only doing, basically it's what's happening in your pixel array on the front of that camera. Okay. So if there is no filter array in front of your pixels, they're all just measuring electrons. They're all just measuring photons, and they know nothing about the colors of those photons. You put a filter in front of them, like a red filter, which means then that all of the photons pass through that red filter, and so we will call those red, but the red stack is going to be gray until I combine it with other colors in processing to make it RGB. A one-shot color camera has a Bayer matrix in front of it, just like a DSLR or a mirrorless, regular camera or your iPhone camera, which basically says that this pixel has a red filter in front of it, this pixel has a blue filter, these two pixels on the diagonals have green filters in front of it. And so I'm measuring all of those wavelengths of light, red, green, and blue at the same time, but only 1/4 of my pixels are red, only 1/4 of them are blue, and half of them are green, but they're all interleaved. So what does that mean? One-shot color in principle has less sensitivity because where I only get 1/4 of my pixels assigned to red. When I do a mono camera, all of my pixels will be assigned to red because they all pass through that red filter. So in principle, more sensitivity and so on in the mono camera. The downside of that is that, of course, you have to now buy filters.
And you got to collect the data for each of those.
And you have to collect the data for for each of those things independently, and then be able to combine those. A lot of people use one-shot color for a lot of reasons. One, the cameras have gotten so good in recent years that you almost really can't tell the difference between one-shot color and the mono cameras anyway. And the second one is, have you seen the weather around here lately? You want to be as efficient as possible in collecting your data, and if you can get all of the RGB all at once, yeah, it's worth getting that knocked out very, very quickly if you possibly can.
Hey
Hey,
Jeff,
Demi-
before we lose too many
Demetra,
other people, let me share
uh,
my screen, show you where the data is going to be.
Yep,
So I think let me see. Yeah, here it is. Can you guys see this? That
yep,
yes, it's
okay.
coming.
So this is the Google Drive for CAS. We're gonna go to CAS Materials, and then right now CAS Imaging
there
Group
it
is at
is.
the top. And then you open that right now. I put one of those things in there from the 18 October meeting. And then the other thing you'll notice if I go back one is I started adding names. I got a few people I could not add, but I've got the following names. I got Anna and Andy and so I've got a whole bunch of names here. But here's who I couldn't get. I couldn't get hold on a second. I couldn't put Greg in because you have a Hotmail and not a Gmail account.
got,
I'm gonna.
you've got a
I'll,
weird email address for me there, but okay.
well, just tell me what it is and I'll change it. But anyway,
Yeah,
and then Matt L. He got off the line, but I never got his email address, so I'll try to contact him separately,
Okay.
and then we'll just load all the stuff in here. And everybody has editing. I appreciate if you didn't, but everybody who's on this call is going to have editing capability until we figure out otherwise.
Yeah,
And and
yeah,
then I'm also going to try one more thing when we're done. I'm going to copy the link and then I'll send it to everybody and see if you get it, Greg. Then
Yeah.
can you still get in?
Yeah, Kevin, I'll send you a Gmail account that you can use instead of the Hotmail.
You the man. Appreciate that. All right, and so we're setting it up right now, and whenever you're ready, Jeff, if you can load the other stuff in there.
yeah, we'll do.
I got two other quick questions for you. I'm using a dual band filter, and somebody said to me, if you're using a dual band filter, I have that ASI, ZWA ASI 2600. It's got a guide chip. It's a smaller guide chip, and somebody said if you're using the guide chip and a dual band filter, you should set the gain for the chip much higher, like 300. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah,
when
yeah.
they increase the integrate the time,
You,
go to
you
two
could do it
seconds
that
instead
way
of one.
too, isn't it? Yeah, increase the integration time. I don't know how ASI Air does its guiding algorithms, but in general, yeah, you probably one of those two things. And the reason is, of course, your dual narrowband filter is covering what, maybe, a total of 15 nanometers versus RGB covering 300 nanometers.
Yeah.
You're obviously collecting a lot fewer photons with the dual narrowband than with the RGB. And so it's going to take either a lot more integration time, or it's going to take boosting the gain to get those stars in the guide chip, enough that your guiding algorithms can detect that.
Yeah, and that was the problem. And the second question is, so I took some frames of Andromeda one night. They were 120-second. I got like 100 frames of 120-second. And then on another night, I did 90-second frames. Does it matter that I have both of those and they're different times?
Yeah, Joe asked that on Slack this week, and the answer to that is you can use both. I mean, there's two ways to go about it to combine those. One is well, in Pix Insight at least, Cyril probably has something similar. You can set the tolerance such that it will include both in the stack. Just make sure that it has both sets of exposures in that thing you're stacking. And then the second part of that is just make sure you're using like a signal to noise ratio based integration or weighting scheme when you're doing the stacking. And the reason is it's got to recognize the difference in quality between those two. The 120s are going to have a lot more photons than the 90s, right?
Mhm.
And so by doing SNR weighting, it will capture that. That said, that doesn't always work well. I have had cases in Pix Insight where I've tried to combine things in that way by just throwing them all into one stack. And Pix Insight, really downweights the shorter exposures so much that it'll either reject them or they don't really count. And I know that's wrong. And so what you can do instead is create two different stacks, a 90-second stack and a 120 stack. And then I can do that. Remember the superluminance thing that we did in the
Hmm.
image processing tutorial? You can do the same thing with images of the same type, just different exposures. Just throw them in there and it will automatically weight the 90-second stack and the 120-second stack and create one integrated
Okay,
stack.
good.
So there's ways to do it.
All right. And finally, I'm going to stop this recording now, and I'm not going to do any processing on